I believe this is a very important meeting. Edmund Safra believes it's a very important meeting. He gave it a lot of personal attention in deciding how that was going to be organized, who was going to attend. We hope this is going to be one of several such in the next several months. We are planning on having not quite a carbon copy, but something very similar in Europe sometime this winter. I want to particularly thank Manuel Diaz, Rick Friedlander, and Ness Pinto and their staff for organizing this conference. I understand last night was very successful. Nobody fell overboard, and you all had a reasonably good time. I also want to announce very briefly there's going to be a slight schedule change. We're going to make lunch a little bit shorter and start the afternoon session. What time, Rick? Where's Rick? I beg your pardon? 1:30. Okay. So we'll try to eat a little faster than we otherwise would. Republic has built a solid reputation as a safe and strong banking institution, following our own conservative practices and principles with a fundamental goal of protecting our depositors' funds. You've all heard that. We eat it, we sleep it, we preach it, and we believe in it, and we practice it. But there can be no safety of funds without the safety of the institution itself. In charting our course into the 21st century, we are dedicated to maintaining Republic's reputation as a premier international bank. And to this end, we are as concerned about compliance with laws and regulations as we are about profit. We all know what's happened in the last 3 years, and the attempt to sully our reputation and what we put into preventing that and overcoming that. And we must preserve that reputation because it is the foundation of our success. In today's world, there's an increasing international dimension of drug trafficking and money laundering that threatens financial institutions. When money launderers successfully place their illegal proceeds in a bank, that bank's reputation and standing is jeopardized, sometimes despite what a bank does to prevent it. Such criminal activity must be detected and thwarted at the earliest stages. We are strongly committed to preventing the use of our worldwide operations by money launderers and others who would use our bank in furtherance of criminal activity. Moreover, we are committed to cooperating with law enforcement authorities in efforts to stop criminals from misusing the banking system. The issue of how to prevent criminals from laundering the proceeds of illegal activities through banks has attracted substantial attention from legislators and law enforcement agencies throughout the world. In response to this focus, money launderers have become more and more sophisticated in their techniques. Consequently, it is critical for us to understand the methods that these criminals are using if we are to develop effective proceeds to prevent money launderers from banking at Republic. Today we are fortunate in having 2 law enforcement experts to speak with us about how Colombian cartels are using the international banking community to launder drug proceeds and how the banking system in general is being infiltrated. I met Greg Pasek, what was it, a year and a half or 2 ago, Greg? And from the very first meeting, the 2 of us, I felt, were speaking the same language, and that is that the banks and the law enforcement agencies are allies. Just this morning at coffee, when we were having some coffee, Greg used that word again. We are allies. We have the same objective. That's especially true at Republic. Greg is a special agent with Drug Enforcement Administration. He is chief of the financial operations sections at DEA headquarters in Washington. In this position, he supervises and coordinates money laundering investigations throughout the world. Prior to his present position in Washington, Greg was DEA's country attaché in Bern, Switzerland for 6 years. Howard Mulholland is a special agent with the Internal Revenue Service. Howard is also assigned to the Financial Operations Section at DEA headquarters as a member of the Multi-Agency Financial Investigation Operations Center. Howard has investigated numerous money laundering cases. I'm not going to waste any more of your time because we've got a lot to learn, a lot to listen to. Greg?
Thanks, Walter. You know, a few years ago, if you would have mentioned that law enforcement was going to be invited to speak to a group of bankers, at least in our side of the house, that might have been compared to inviting a cobra to a convention of mongooses. But we have had, I think, a very good relationship with Republic. And one of the things that first impressed me in dealing with your leadership was their earnest and very legitimate concern that the bank not be made available to money launderers. And this sincerity, I think, is what brought Howard and I to Miami to speak to you today, because we know that this is more than just a cosmetic brush-over briefing on how the bank can avoid problems, but your leadership is really interested in making sure the bank does not get involved in laundering drug money, and that's why we really appreciate this chance to come and talk with you. About 20 years ago, as a young narcotics agent in Denver, Colorado, I bought an ounce of cocaine. This is an undercover role that we in U.S. law enforcement often play when you want to penetrate a drug trafficking organization. And after I bought that first ounce, my senior partner was very proud of the fact I'd been able to act as a crook and lauded me for the great lies I told during this operation. And I thought, geez, I did a real good job. Well, he went skiing the next weekend, and as he ran out the door, he says, "Look, Greg, whatever you do, don't do anything. I know that you might have a chance, an informant might walk in and say, geez, I've got the greatest case. There's a dump truck full of cocaine on Colorado Boulevard, and come and get it." But he said, "Wait until I get back, please." And I assured him I wouldn't do anything. Well, sure enough, Friday afternoon, in came another source of information saying that he had met a cocaine trafficker. So I immediately, drawing on my experience of doing one undercover deal and being undercover for about 20 minutes, decided, well, I can do this by myself. So I drew out $600 of cash advance, which I was going to pay for the ounce of cocaine, and arranged for the surveillance group to meet me at JB's restaurant on Colorado Boulevard, where the criminal was going to show up. So I waited until about 5:30. He was supposed to show up at 5. And then we decided that, well, he wasn't going to come, so we'd call it a day and go back to the office. As I was exiting the restaurant, the drug trafficker walked in the front door. Unfortunately, the surveillance squad had been told that the deal was off, so they all left. I didn't realize that. So with my $600 in my pocket, and I figured I'm going to go make this second great undercover buy of cocaine from this criminal. So we walked out to his car, and he sat in the front seat and opened up the glove compartment, and he said, "Do you have the money?" I said, "Yeah, I have the money. Have you got the dope?" He says, "Yeah, I got the dope. You sure you got the money?" "Uh-huh. Let me see the drugs first." So he reached in the glove compartment, and instead of pulling out a packet of cocaine, he pulled out a gun. So I figured, well, I won't shoot him now. I'll wait until, he tries to drive away, and then the surveillance crew will come in and we'll stop him like in Dragnet and get even. So I handed over the money, very confident that this guy would not be able to escape our trap. And he very slowly just drove out on Colorado Boulevard, and down the street he went. And I was standing there with my little 5-shot pistol, feeling very helpless in the middle of the parking lot. What I learned through that process was that this drug trafficker, and he was a cocaine distributor in Denver, Colorado, made an assessment of me, and he decided, why do I need to sell this kid cocaine when I can steal his money? And that's exactly what he did. I learned a lot through that process. I learned that the people that we deal with in this business, in the narcotics business, are not in it because they find joy in distributing various types of powders, or they feel that they're acute in doing that. They do it for one thing, and that's the money. About a year later, I volunteered for an assignment in Turkey. Back in 1972, we had agreed to pay the Turkish government $53 million to stop growing opium in exchange for allowing a undercover team of agents to go in and monitor the availability of opium and morphine base in Turkey, and I was picked for that assignment and was able to drive around the Turkish countryside posing as a drug buyer, not with my wallets or my pockets filled with cash, but on occasion maybe a Mercedes with a suitcase of money in the trunk, but a much more cautious young narcotics agent. And what I found during that process is that if they felt like we were representing arms traffickers or other ways of making money, generating money, that would make more money than selling morphine base, they would get sidetracked. And you might use a ruse of, well, I've got connections to armed traffickers. And at that time, the PLO and other groups were interested in trading guns for arms, so we'd use that as an end. Well, the next thing we knew, we were off on a tangent for weapons instead of drugs, because the people were not really interested in the drugs. They were interested in the money. In any business that generated more money, that's the business they jumped into. So we've been involved in, actually, DEA used to be part of Treasury. Howard's got a poster in his office at DEA that says only an accountant could catch Al Capone, and he's true there. But we used to be part of the Treasury Department for almost 50 years, and during that time we learned as an agency, I think, the value of following money. It's the best way to develop a drug conspiracy. We in the United States have excellent conspiracy laws and asset forfeiture laws. And we have found out that by chasing the money instead of chasing powders, you end up getting expedited access to the top of drug trafficking organizations. Now, to you, that's going to mean good news and bad news. I think the bad news, as it will be seen in some circles of the banking community, is there's going to be increased scrutiny into banking operations by the law enforcement community. The good news is I think we have opened up a dialogue with you. The fact that Howard and I are here today addressing you, I believe, is a step in the right direction. If I can just sidetrack a little bit and maybe explain what kind of a hybrid operation we have going in DEA right now. There are 5 primary federal agencies in the U.S. government that chase drug proceeds: Postal Service, IRS, FBI, DEA, and Customs. And we found that we were often investigating money laundering groups or the financial aspects of drug trafficking groups in a parallel fashion, not necessarily coordinating our efforts, or if we had overlap, it was by chance and not by design. So about a year ago, we decided to do things a little bit differently, and we requested through the Drug Czar's office that a interagency group be established in Washington, D.C., where all of us can sit down at a table and we can go through the leads that come across our desk and come up with a strategy or a way of pursuing that. And that's what Howard and I are on our way to Columbia this afternoon. He's representing IRS and Treasury. I'll be representing DEA and the FBI. We're going to be sitting down with our Colombian counterparts and also addressing the Colombian Bankers Association later this week to also try to open up a window with those people. I've had a chance to, I guess they refer it to as hunting in elephant country, by working in Switzerland for almost 6 years. My basic, I guess, goal was to stop the flow of cocaine proceeds that were going through Swiss banks. And when I first arrived in Switzerland, they weren't too happy about having DEA representation in the country. They were concerned that we would be more interested in trying to penetrate banking secrecy for various reasons. They were comfortable with maybe going after drug monies, but they felt like having a U.S. representative in their country that was establishing liaison with the banking industry and law enforcement, that we would have other motives. And it took a while to convince the Swiss bankers that we were only interested in one thing, and that was stopping drug proceeds from getting into their financial institutions. I know we have some representatives of your bank from Geneva that are here today, and I'm sure that they followed with interest the happenings in Switzerland as DEA programs. And when I say DEA programs, IRS, FBI, and Customs were also represented in most of those investigations. However, DEA has been designated the point of contact overseas for the law enforcement community when it comes to drug-related crimes. So most of these cases were multi-agency, but DEA had the point. There was a lot of speculation, a lot of things that were written in the newspapers about us being there. But I think that the banking community slowly became comfortable with working with the law enforcement community in Switzerland and working with us. They had a problem because of Swiss banking secrecy laws. If they felt something was suspicious, they were unable to share that with law enforcement. Very difficult thing. That has since been changed, but I think in general the attitude of the banking community changed. I remember talking to a banker in Geneva one day who told me that he also had children that had been affected by drug abuse. And he felt very strongly in trying to help in any manner he could to fight drugs, and he realized the role that the bank could play if it was actively engaged. And just sitting down and talking to him and learning through his eyes and through what he had experienced as a banker, I learned an awful lot. And I would hope that we have the same kind of relationship with the people that are in this room. The third hour, we're going to open it up for questions. We're going to try to get into some actual cases. And I would love to hear your experiences and maybe some of the ideas that you have, because you are on the front line out there. You're the one that is dealing with the customers, maybe not in the private banking area of the bank so much, but you're out there where the action's taking place. So we'd love to hear from you and get some of your ideas before this morning session is out. Back to the new strategy, because this is going to involve the people that are the law enforcement officials in Latin America. In April of this year, we met in Cartagena with all of the leaders of the federal police and federal narcotics bureaus in basically the Western Hemisphere. And we presented a three-point strategy for attacking the cocaine kingpins, as we call them, or the cocaine bosses. And the strategy differs radically from what we've been doing in the last 10 years. The strategy calls for chasing things that are going south from the United States, not necessarily chasing powders going from Latin America to the U.S., but things going in the other direction. We're going to be going after precursor chemicals. We're going to be going after cash, monies derived from cocaine sales in the States, and also disruption of general aviation. Doesn't mean we're going to give up on interdiction efforts into the U.S., but everyone agreed that was at that meeting, and it was passed unanimously, that those would be the three points that we would be concentrating and focusing the law enforcement effort on. It was also decided that each of the federal police agencies in Latin America would create a financial investigative group. And that group, once it was established, would undergo training in either Washington, D.C. or locally in country. 6 weeks ago, Howard and I hosted a conference at DEA headquarters. We had, I believe, 26 representatives from the Andean region participating in that forum. We were quite surprised at the level of interest we had. The Attorney General from Peru attended. And everyone agreed. They said if we are going to have a meaningful assault on the cocaine bosses of Latin America, we have got to somehow attack or disrupt their power base and their their base of power is directly attributed to their ability to get monies into their organization and therefore expanding their influence. They cannot operate with impunity in a geographic area unless they've got the financial means to do it. And that means influencing local governments, corrupting police officials, basically able to control their environment. The world in Cartagena got just a little bit smaller. To go back to U.S. laws against money laundering, or U.S. laws in general, in the United States, when our country was established a couple hundred years ago, our laws basically were created by geographic needs. In Iowa, 150 years ago, they had no need for financial laws. Their laws were cattle rustling or, other types of theft involving farm equipment. New York was the first area, and I'm sure Ann could add a little bit to this later on, that really recognized financial crime. And New York was one of the first areas to pass financial laws. Now, in federal law enforcement, it wasn't until 1968 that we had a federal drug law where we realized that, geez, we cannot attack drug trafficking by using the state and local ordinances spread throughout the United States because they just aren't the same. Nebraska does not have the same kind of crime that Miami, Florida does. So we have a federal law now that we basically have rolled across the United States that enables everybody to play with the same rules. Well, what we learned in the last 20 years, instead of drug trafficking organizations being controlled from Miami with branches in New York and Houston, we now have a situation where the head of the organization is in Colombia. And Houston is now the United States. New York is now Europe. The world has gotten so small with the use of fax machines, other types of means of communication. We have enabled the drug trafficker leadership to move back into safe havens. In this city, if you go back 15 years ago, the Colombian cocaine bosses were basically trying to set up like an old mafia organization in New York City. Find a very competent guy who is in charge of a geographic area, move him into that area, let him build his team, let him pick the best people that he can find for not only distribution, he can get his own financial advisors, he can bring his own muscle in, he can bring his own tough guys in because drug trafficking, as any organized criminal activity, requires your ability to intimidate, your ability to injure, your ability to kill for the goals of the organization. What they found 15 years ago when they had a shootout like in Dadeland, innocent people were getting shot down in this area, became very violent, that if there was a boss in the area, he'd get picked up. If the police were able to catch someone and gain their cooperation, he basically would identify those people that he knew that were within our jurisdiction, and some of the bosses went to jail here. So we saw a shift in I believe, the early 80s in the United States to remove the key members of the cocaine cartels, and I'm not talking just about the Colombian cartels, but also Bolivian and Peru. Take those key players, the ones that were so critical for the smooth running of the trafficking organization. Let's get those people back into safe haven areas where we control the environment, and we will replace those people with employees. These employees will not necessarily be members of the cartel. They'll be paid a salary to perform a specific function. The other thing that the cocaine cartels did was turn to the use of vendors or subcontractors to move cocaine north and to move money south. When you have an employee of the cartel come into your bank, he didn't grow up on the streets of Medellin or Cali. He does not have an alliance with the cocaine boss per se. He has basically been contacted by a financial advisor of the controller of the cartel to perform a specific purpose. The person that walks into your bank probably will not know the origin of the funds. He might know that someplace along his points of contact, a Colombian businessman was involved, or a Peruvian or a Bolivian businessman, but generally will be approached in the same manner that a legitimate business would approach a financial consultant. One thing that the cocaine cartels have learned is how we can penetrate and discover that they are moving drug monies. One of the first things the cartels will do today, when one of their members gets arrested, or even one of their minor players, one of the cell workers gets arrested, they will get the best legal advice they can. They'll send them into the United States, and they will fight the U.S. government on that criminal proceeding up until the 11th hour. And after disclosure, after they have determined how we have been able to penetrate that drug trafficking group, they've got all the government's evidence, they will plead guilty. The person's family will be taken care of Colombia. They'll have to sit a few years in jail here in the U.S., but the cartel has gained some very valuable experience that will keep them from being discovered the next time around. If there is anything that's happened in the drug trafficking business in the last 10 years, it's been the capitalization and the business-like manner, the business-like procedures that the cocaine cartels have adopted. They've done this because they know it is very frustrating to law enforcement to penetrate that type of an operation. It will be very frustrating to you as bankers to recognize these people when they enter your banks. Howard and I will be telling you, giving you a couple of examples on how they have used the banks in the past. But the challenge I have for the group that's here today is, what are they going to do next year? This is where we need your help. You will see subtle changes and trends out there that you'll pick up before we will. We are very interested in these subtle changes. Doesn't mean that you have to pick up the phone and dime out a customer just because you're suspicious. But it means that if you do see something out there that's just a little bit different, so important to get it back to Ann Shop, who will be working with us to see if we can discover these new trends as they emerge. I'd like to explain one recent success we had against a Colombian kingpin and kind of show how this person set up his financial empire. And we were able to get into this kingpin's pocketbook basically through a series of events that took place in Colombia about 1.5 years ago. It started with the assassination of Luis Carlos Galán, presidential candidate, who basically ran on the ticket, if elected, I want these guys out of my country. I will extradite them to the United States where they will stand trial for crimes they have committed in that country. Galán lasted about 2 months in his campaign when he was gunned down in Bogota. People responsible for that shooting were believed to be Jose Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha and the infamous Pablo Escobar. The Colombian government, in an emergency meeting, decided they've gone one step too far. Let's go out and seize the properties belonging to these two drug kingpins. The Army and the police, working in a coordinated fashion, started grabbing the ranches and properties, anything they could grab a hold of, to include Pablo's zoo. In the second week of that operation, they discovered a 55-gallon barrel of financial records on a ranch belonging to the nephew of Gacha, a place called La Esmeralda. The Colombian government, realizing that most of the accounts were outside of Colombia, were interspersed through Asia and Western Europe, some in the United States and Panama, and having worked closely with us in other financial cases, asked us to help them. And they turned those records over to us. We had them in Washington, and through the interagency effort, we're able to go through that stack of documents and schedule out specific bank accounts. We contacted our offices in Switzerland, Luxembourg, Austria, United Kingdom, and Hong Kong and asked for their assistance in blocking those monies. Within a 2-week period, I think we had about $64 million that was frozen. As our counterparts came back to us and gave us the names of specific members of the organization that had opened those bank accounts, we were able to identify a key player and was later approached, agreed to meet with us in Costa Rica, and we were able to, for the first time, get a inside view of what was going on in Gotcha's head as far as his monies were concerned. What we discovered through that process was that as the bank accounts were being frozen, Gotcha and Escobar were very uncomfortable about moving their monies. They instructed their financial advisors to stop the flow of monies coming from the United States. Now, talked about trends. This would be a very important thing for us to know. If you have a customer who has a steady flow of cash through an account over a 2 or 3 year period, and all of a sudden it stops, that could be just as important to us as someone who basically cranks up the amount of money that goes through the account, because a law enforcement interdiction into the system will cause that type of a cessation of the flows of money. Pablo Escobar was also, unknowingly, we see some money belonging to the Gavirias in Luxembourg that was related to Pablo. He also did the same thing, so let's slow the monies down here until we find out how law enforcement has gotten into the group. There were numerous killings in Medellin as a result of that. There was a lot of distrust that went through the Gaviria Escobar Gotcha organizations at that time. And if you can recall, this was at a time when they were blowing Avianca Airlines out of the air. They bombed the DOS building in Bogota. Chiefs of police, judges were being assassinated with regularity in Colombia. It was not a good time for either the Colombians or for the Medellin cartel. We saw that the bosses, these people who commanded vast resources, who owned significant land holdings in Colombia, became overnight cash poor. They could not generate the cash that they needed to pay for the armies that traveled with them and protected them. During this time period, Gotcha, who was probably the baddest of the bad, the richest of the rich, left his envelope of his safe haven, a place where he felt very secure, very protected, impossible for us to get to him, and was participating in a very hastily organized onload of cocaine, very minor onload, in fact, 400 kilos, on the north coast of Colombia when he was discovered by 2 people who reported that to DEA and the Colombian National Police, who responded with 2 helicopter gunships, located Gotcha and his group of bodyguards, got into a tremendous firefight in the jungle. Basically, Gotcha and 8 of his bodyguards were killed. Subsequent searches of his ranches in Colombia revealed caches of gold and currency. $42 million, in fact, was dug out of the ground in about a 3-week period. That was coupled with another $90 million of monies that we were able to freeze in bank accounts in Western Europe, Hong Kong, and we later were able to get into Panama and seize $22 million of that money. The way Gotcha invested those funds was an interesting story in itself. And it started back in 1985 when at a ranch in Colombia that was showing show horses, Gotcha bumped into a nephew who was investing monies, exchanging monies in Bogota. And Gotcha explained to the nephew that he was interested in opening up investment accounts, so-called IRA accounts outside of Colombia, that he was not comfortable with investing all of his cocaine proceeds in real estate in Colombia. He wanted bank accounts outside. This person bumped into another fellow who we were able to later talk to and determine how these series of events took place. But bottom line was the person who was asked to invest the monies was not told initially that it was Gotcha's money. He was only told that it was money from wealthy landowners in Colombia who were concerned about inflation in Colombia. They were concerned about the same things that a legitimate Colombian businessman would be concerned about, and therefore did not raise any red flags initially. So the individual that I was talking to agreed to invest monies, open up bank accounts in Western Europe for the nephew. And what he did, he went through the various banks in the UK, Luxembourg, Switzerland, having a background in economics, having a background in investments, a very credible business-type person who had vouchers throughout the banking community because he had been an investment banker for almost 8 years up to this time, would walk into the bank and say, I'd like to open up a series of accounts here. Co-account holders will be the following people, all of which were female relatives of Gotcha, none of them having his last name. If you were not a Colombian from the Medellin area, you wouldn't know that these people were in any way related to the drug baron. And after the bank accounts were open and the signatories would sign the signatory sheets that would enable them to transfer monies, he would have each family member sign 20 to 30 blank pieces of paper. So he had the signatures. So when he went back to Panama, all he would do is type up a letter to the bank saying, please transfer $1 million from my account from A to B, and there was the signature. In fact, when the records were dug out of the ground, the Colombians were very confused that a lot of these signatures were just blank pieces of paper with the signature were found among those records. Being a banker in Luxembourg or Switzerland or Vienna at that time would have been pretty tough to discern who the actual monies belonged to. You might have been able to do a little bit of checking to find out who the investor was in Panama. You could have checked with the other banks and found out he had a good reputation. One of the things, though, that should have jumped off the chart and raised a suspicion was the fact that once these accounts were open, there was a in and out transfer, and it very seldom involved more than $1 million in a 30-day period. All of a sudden, the accounts got loaded up to $8, $9, $10, $12 million. The amount of monies increased by tenfold that began to go into those accounts, and the person that opened the accounts went back to the nephew and said, hey, I don't like this, and was told, well, maybe it's time you found out who you were working for. Blindfolded him, put him in the back of a car, drove him to another location where he was picked up by another car with radio communication, and was finally delivered to El Mexicano's or Gotcha's ranch, where he met the boss. And basically what Gotcha told him is, hey, look, you made a lot of money investing my funds. Let there be no doubt, that's Coke money you've invested. You can make a lot of additional money. You can also end up dead very quickly. There's a lot of profit in this business. However, you take a risk by accepting that profit. Well, this individual was very uncomfortable about that and explained to the boss, hey, the amounts of money you're running through my accounts are going to raise a suspicion of the banking community. I'm going to be beginning to feel some heat, therefore it's going to be more difficult for us to do this. And Gotcha basically told him, you're in this thing until you find someone who can replace you. In other words, have no choice. Now, people in Latin America that walk into your banks, they might be legitimate business people. They might have been doing business with the bank for 10 or 15 years. And they will be approached by someone who will say, hey, would you help us out? We'd like to invest some monies. Next thing you know, the investments get just a little bit bigger, and the next thing you know, this person can't get out. With the best of intentions, these people know how to exploit legitimate business people. And this person might not have started that relationship with the bank with the idea of moving drug money for a cocaine kingpin, but once he's in, he's in. And very difficult for this person to get out. How much time will we take? Do you want to take how do you want to run this, with breaks, or if I start putting you to sleep, raise your hand or fall off your chair or something, okay? Maybe I get into one more little anecdotal case, and then we'll take a break, and then Howard can do his thing, okay? And this doesn't involve a Colombian kingpin. It involves a South Florida marijuana kingpin. This fellow basically was a powerboat racer, a very successful one at that. In fact, he won the world championship about 5-6 years ago. And to fund his purchase of boats, marinas in the South Florida area, he would run one load of marijuana up a year from the north coast of Colombia, and would collect about $50 to $55 million per year for that load. He went through the Channel Islands, went through lawyers in the Channel Islands who made arrangements for his father, elderly gentleman, 70 years old, very well dressed with a briefcase, white hair, business-like appearance, showed up in Liechtenstein one day with a lawyer from the Channel Islands. We would like to establish a trust in Liechtenstein. We would also like to establish a bank account that enables us to do business with partners, business partners that we have here in Europe. We're in the powerboat business. We have made contact with some of the main suppliers of marine engines in Italy, the Maseratis and Ferraris of the boat world, and they will be supplying engines to our plant in South Florida that will go into our racing boats, and therefore we have to have a bank here on the continent where we can very easily exchange monies, whatever. Sounded very plausible to the Liechtenstein bank at that time. Well, after monies began being downloaded into that account from both the Channel Islands and from Italy, father shows up again and said, geez, I need to, we're going to buy a marina in Florida. We'd like to borrow some money, but we like to have this loan made through the Channel Islands if you can just run it through our trust we have there. And basically borrowed from using the account as equity in Liechtenstein over $40 million. Purchased a beautiful marina here, purchased the world's largest card casino on the West Coast. In fact, this place never closed. It was so successful, took up almost an acre, and it became government property about a year ago, and I think our interest when it was sold was about $125 million. It was a real winner for the government because this fellow invested in things that the value went up. Bottom line, this marijuana trafficker with his $55 million a year income generated holdings that were seizable in the United States that were over $300 million. Uncle Sam now has seized and forfeited those properties. Going through the procedure in Liechtenstein with my colleagues from the IRS and Customs, and seeing how these accounts were set up using fiduciaries and trusts in the loan buyback scheme, and the use of very prominent lawyers in the South Florida area. If you went back to reconstruct this, you could take every person in that chain and you could do the best background check possible, and you'd come up with people that were spotless. Point I'm trying to make is the days of the Colombians walking into your bank with a suitcase full of cash are over. They've gotten way beyond that. They hire the best investment talent that's out there. In fact, the most expensive element of a drug trafficking organization today is the money. Product is about 30% of the overall cost of the organization, the cocaine. The biggest cost, 60% of total cost to that business, is collecting the monies, smurfing the monies or transferring them into a negotiable form, getting them into a bank, transferring the monies, and investing the monies. Far exceeds the cost of the product. The days are gone when the hood would walk into a bank or approach or intimidate a banker or say, geez, we can get rich off this. They're going to be very smooth when they come into their bank. There are things to watch for, though. You people know what a legitimate business account is like. As hard as these people try to churn that account and to make it look like a legitimate business, there are always foul-ups there. We realize you're bankers, you're not policemen, and it will be asking in many cases too much for you to scrutinize every client you have. What we're asking you for is when that red flag does pop up, when something looks just a little bit unusual, get it back to Ann. We'll take a look at it, and I think the bottom line is if it appears to us that that is drug-related, you're going to be saving the bank a lot of headaches, the reputation of the bank, and you'll be providing a very vital service to us who have the goal of basically attacking the cartels by attacking their financial infrastructure, by making it just a little bit more difficult for them to do business. I've got a couple of other anecdotal cases I'd like to go through, and I'll turn it over to Howard, but why don't we take a break now? The point I'd like to make here is federal law enforcement's getting a little bit better in tracking proceeds. We're looking for assets, and as you can see, over the last 3 years, we've almost doubled our assets. In fact, this total here was amended about 6 months ago to indicate $1.2 billion. More importantly than the 1.2 bill that was seized was the $203 million that was taken from both Cali and Medellin, gotcha monies and monies belonging to the Londano Group. One of the trends that we saw shift in the past year, when we went after the gotcha monies, I think the biggest account had $22 million in it, and that was money that was transferred from Hong Kong through Switzerland into an account in Panama. After those monies were grabbed, Cali learned that if you have a big account, it brings a little more scrutiny, a little more interest. So as a fallout to the seizures we were making chasing gotchas money around, Luxembourg cop became very interested in checking Colombian customers, clients of the banks there, and in cooperation with us identified a Colombian money launderer, began to follow him around with our assistance throughout Western Europe. This fellow went to 16 different countries in a 3-month time period, and he opened up 115 bank accounts. And the largest amount that he had in any given bank account was $400,000. In fact, we were able to seize, actually Luxembourg police seized his computer, and on that computer were explicit instructions by Londano's controller, Colombia, telling him how I want this money invested. That trial was going on in Luxembourg this week, by the way. 3 Colombians are being tried there, but without jeopardizing their case and getting into details, what these fellows were asked to do was to open up bank accounts using family members or trusted associates of the drug boss. Don't put more than $400,000 in the account. And they were instructed to deposit the monies in a bank in a country where you could transfer the monies within a 24-hour time period. According to the instructions, that is when it's probably the most dangerous time, because if a banker is suspicious, he notifies the police, we can get to the bank account before the money's transferred. Once the money is put into a wire form, transfer it into an account in Europe, that has a Spanish partner, Spanish, Colombian, Panamanian business now. Once you get it into Europe, into that account, run it into another bank account, which preferably has a Western European company as the front, or a Japanese company. When you get it into that stage, you have to put it into one more account before you can use it. Those are the instructions that the investor was given. When we started shutting those bank accounts down, we noticed the monies were going to awfully weird places. Budapest, Hungary, a new player on the block. Some of the monies, instead of going back to Panama, went into Tel Aviv. Both Israel and Hungary were the two first countries to help us block those monies. Seized them in a second. $67 million was basically removed during that operation from the Cali cartel. So the two big hitters lost over $200 million, and it's caused them to, I think, rethink how they're putting money into the banking system. We think that they're in a state of flux right now. They don't know. They're looking for new avenues and looking for new vehicles. Part of the reason we're going to Colombia later today is we want to exploit that. They're a little bit off balance right now, and this is a time that I think we have a chance to take some disruptive actions. Just to give you an idea of some of the businesses we bumped into in the past 18 months that are facilitating or are laundering monies, I think all of those are well known to you people. Probably the biggest problem we've got right now are the money transmittal houses, or the cambios. This is it's going to be a pain, not only for us but for you. Somehow the cash has got to get into the system. As the United States enacted laws making it more difficult to get monies into U.S. banks, the banks are being more vigilant. It's requiring them to export their cash. In fact, most of our major cases right now, we're seeing the money. Oh. Can you read all those?
Can you explain what gyros are?
Gyros it's like a money exchange house. Maybe somebody that has had to do with those Howard gyros.
It is. It's just like
It's like a cambio, right?
It's the same thing.
Where are they?
Mostly throughout, where are they? Eastern Europe.
Yeah, I don't know what the word gyros means, and Turkey also refers to it.
Money order. Yeah.
Okay. Postal money orders. They've seen a huge expansion of purchases. American Express checks have gone up. A typical cell operating in the United States will generate between $20 and $40 million a month. And that cell has got to somehow convert that big pile of money they have into a smaller pile. Can you imagine having $5 million in your basement? And that's not a big amount of money to have for one of these workers in the New York or Miami or Houston area. You can't call Brinks to protect it. You can't call the cops to guard it. Other people know that you've got the money in the basement. You've got to convert that into some kind of a negotiable, either a traveler's check, some medium that you can smuggle, get it out of the country. I think they fear in many ways the competition more so than law enforcement. And the cell structure of the Colombians right now is set up to protect themselves from those two traditional enemies, law enforcement and competition. It's a pain for these people. Typical Smurf in New York City will handle between $20,000 and $50,000 a day. That's what he picks up in the morning, and that's what he's got to go out and convert into traveler's checks, postal money orders, other kinds of cashier's checks. And you might see those being repatriated back through your banks in the name of a business. What you should look for are markings on the back of the check or sometimes on the front of the check, because the money laundering process has shifted from exclusive use of individuals to switching to vendors. One money launderer will handle money for both cartels, for both Cali and Medellin. Last year we had a seizure of 20 tons of cocaine and $17 million in Silmar, California. If you look at the markings on the cocaine, we had 42 cocaine distributors that had basically used the same transportation vehicle to get the coke up to the LA area. Same thing with the monies. In fact, the $17 million that was seized was not going back to the drug kingpin. It was the transportation fee to the Mexican trucking company who received a $1,000 per kilo for coke brought north. They receipted in a 7-month period $82 million for nothing but transportation fees. Not just the drug kingpin is going to be moving large amounts of money, but the people that service in the industry, who run trucking companies, whatever, smuggling coke and planes, will also be showing up with large amounts of money. These vendors are getting economically very powerful. They're critical to the organization, but if they get arrested or disrupted, there are 3 more just like them out there. Back to the smuggling vehicles that they're using. Anything from wire spools to trap vehicles. In fact, if we went down to park in downtown Miami and watched a cocaine trafficker this afternoon move a kilo of coke, and we ask him to take the money he collects and put it in another bag, at the end of the day, that kilogram of cocaine will have become 3 kilograms of banknotes, because most of the retail drug sales take place with 5s, 10s, and $20 bills. So if they were able to fill every trap in every car and boat and plane that brought cocaine north with banknotes, they can only remove 1/3 of their banknotes from the United States. So they're forced to take at least 2/3 of that and convert it into either a wire form, which Howard will get into a little bit later, or cashier's checks, traveler's checks, things like that. There is an industry in this country, and that's all they do. We estimate 500 to 1,000 people. That's all they do all day long, is take that $50,000 stack in the morning and bring it back to the boss in the evening in a form that can be tucked into a DHL or an express delivery envelope. The use of legitimate and front companies. A Colombian in the United States will most likely contact someone who is indigenous, at least to this area, or if it's in Panama, Panamanian. He's not going to want to be out front. He will go in Venezuela to a Venezuelan and ask him, I want you to set up the front company. I want you to open up the bank accounts. I want you to be in charge of the operation here. They know that it raises a red flag. They used to almost exclusively handle business themselves. They've learned to trust the vendors. They learned that there's less suspicion cast upon them if they use other people. One of the things we've noticed in the past year is the desire of the kingpin to purchase black market items. $1 is about the least welcome thing in Colombia today that you can bump into. We basically have purchased every peso available with our drug dollars. If you sell $1 on the black market in Bogota today, you get a 20% less than the official rate return on your dollar. There are cities in Colombia that use almost exclusively dollars to purchase goods and services. We've flooded the economies in certain Latin American countries with our dollars. Venezuela is a new hotspot. We were talking about this during the break. They're seeing an upsurge in economic activity. The hard currencies are coming in. I think the Colombians are very comfortable with using Venezuela. They're more comfortable with using Argentina now. They do not need to get all of their assets, all of their holdings back into Colombia right now. I think they're waiting to see. We've seen a lot of capital go back into Colombia, but I think it's partially because the business people, legitimate holders of hard currencies who were escaping inflation, business people who were afraid that if they had too large of holdings in Colombia, we're going to get kidnapped. Very legitimate concern. Being a businessman in certain parts of Latin America, you or your family is going to get grabbed if you have indications that you've got wealth. We're seeing that money come back in. We are also seeing commingled with that money drug monies. But what we're seeing even more are automobile parts, diesel generators, aircraft engines, things that are high-line items, high-cost items that will be brought back into Colombia. Typical thing are aircraft. We have basically a fleet of ghost aircraft operating in the Andean region right now. When a smuggling aircraft goes down in Mexico, they will note the tail number, and these planes go down every week. You can make a lot of money flying a load of dope, up to $500,000 a load, but you're taking a lot of risk. You're flying at nighttime. You're landing in strips that are not paved in some cases. You fly in all kinds of weather, and when these planes go in, the tail will be noted. They'll purchase a clone aircraft, same kind of plane, in the United States. They'll repaint the aircraft. They'll put the tail number on that aircraft to the plane that's in the desert in Mexico, and that plane will return to Colombia or Peru or Bolivia in a month. Same aircraft, same tail number. If you check the engine, though, for serial numbers and things like that, you'll find out it's a clone aircraft. They do that because they avoid paying taxes on the plane. In many countries, the importation tax on a high-line item is almost 100% of the value. So if you're talking a $2 or $3 million Turbo Commander, nothing against taxes, but trying to beat the tax man is very important to these people. It's interesting the extent that a criminal will go to save money. Sometimes making himself very vulnerable in an area like taxes. That's why DEA really appreciates and cherishes the fact that we've got a very close working relationship with the IRS now. Because we realize building a criminal case is quite difficult in many instances. But if we have assets identifiable, these guys can take it away from them in a heartbeat. And it has just as much of a disruptive effect on the trafficking organization as putting the boss in the slammer. In fact, the true key element, key player in today's multinational drug trafficking organization is not the drug kingpin, it's his controller. If we look at one of these organizations as being a multinational corporation and compare it to something along the lines of General Motors, we in law enforcement would not attack it by seizing the Chevy dealership here on Biscayne Boulevard. We would probably fly to Detroit. We would go to the receptionist and ask her to please tell us where the controller of General Motors is. And then we would go to that office and put a padlock on the door. When they're unable to make payroll, when they're unable to buy raw product, when they're unable to pay the transportation fees, they shut down. If you take the boss of General Motors or Chrysler and remove them, there's a deputy there that can run the operation. So the thrust of the law enforcement effort will be to identify the controllers, identify the vendors of the cash, those people that are key players, and we're going to go after them this time around. I'm going to turn this over to Howard, and he can share his experiences with you from an IRS point of view, and then we'll do maybe some questions and answers, and would really welcome the hard questions too. You've got a shot at us today if you've got some complaints or gripes, or if you can see things that we're doing well and doing things not so well. Let's hear about them, and we'll edit your film later, okay? I'll turn this off.
One of the things that I'd like to key on is specifically what Greg mentioned and what you folks here at Republic National Bank are trying to do. The way to attack the war on drugs, as everyone has said, is through the money. It's profit motive, it's profit driven, Without the money, there's no business. We can work supply, we can work demand, we can try and educate our citizens on drug use, which we should and we're trying to do. But if we can stop the money, if we can take away the profit motive, if we can keep the capital from getting back into the hands of the drug traffickers so that they can form their multinational corporations and buy all their product, then we can really do some damage and we can stop the cartels and stop the drug trafficking. The law enforcement community at the federal level, through the group that Greg and I represent, have tried to put away past problems, overcome differences, sit down and share intelligence, share resources, and find out how we can really do some damage in stopping the drug cartels and stopping the war on drugs. However, we're only one side of the equation. Law enforcement can only do so much. That's why we rely on you, the public sector, particularly the banking community, to help us, to educate us, to allow us to work with you and allow you to work with us within the constraints of the law, the Right to Financial Privacy Act, the Bank Secrecy Act, to do what we can to stop the mess, to stop the money, to put a halt on the system. What we're trying to do is get right down to the grassroots level of the banking system and how these drug traffickers get their money into the system. We want to go right down to the correspondent bank, right down to the branch bank, right down to the intermediate level where the guy walks in with a stack of 20s and says, I want to deposit $6 million in 20s. And if the banker doesn't ask the question, gee, what do you do? What's the source of this money? What's the source of these funds? If it doesn't raise a question to you, then it's going to get into the system and it's going to make its way through. Law enforcement might find it, we might not. But if we can get you folks, what you're in the process of doing and helping us right now, to understand your customer, and I see that's the next topic on here. I can't stress that enough. It's just that simple. If you know your customer, if you understand your customer, then your problem with drug trafficking proceeds are going to be greatly reduced. Some of the things that we're seeing is the drug traffickers are using the innocent businessman and using his accounts to put money back into the system. The innocent businessman in a foreign country is buying dollars and putting them into a dollar account and moving his accounts through the United States. We've had cases where the government, in working money laundering, narcotics trafficking cases, have turned around and frozen massive amounts of accounts that we know that narcotics money has gone through. When we look back behind these accounts after we've frozen them, we found out some have been General Motors, some have been the New York Stock Exchange, the Chicago Commodities Exchange, and the innocent businessman. Putting narco dollars into the banking system and having it go through that system hurts everybody. When we turn around and seize the accounts, the account holders aren't happy. It puts a bad light on us. The banking community isn't happy because we've frozen your accounts. It's something that we both need to do to educate each other how we can overcome these problems and how we can get down to really get to the money and stop the narcotics trafficking that's going on. We're well beyond the days of shipping the money out in airplanes and in boxes and aboard ships, though that still goes on. We domestically, we tried to stop it with the use of CTRs, $10,000 cash transactions, 8300s, CMIRs. Are they helping? Absolutely. Are they the answer? No, because they're circumventing that. They're finding ways to get around it. They started smurfing, buying cashier's checks for $9,999. They beat the system. How did we stop that? You folks, the banking community, assisted us by saying, hey, you know, the law is $10,000. They're coming in with $9,000. There's something strange going on here. And you let us know about it. Then we're able to turn around and take a look at it. Maybe for whatever reason those are legitimate. If they are, fine, we'll let them go. However, if they're not, we'd like to know about them and we can do something about them. Suspicious transaction reports. They're a tremendous help to us on any different level, either at the branch level, the guy making a $9,900 deposit, or even through your wire transfer systems. I had a chance to talk to Mr. Lloyd a little bit earlier here about wire transfers. How can you know where every wire transfer is coming from? How can you know what's behind every correspondent bank transfer? How can you know whether it's good money or bad money? And the answer is you can't. What can we do to turn around and identify that money? How can we identify narcotics money that's being wire transferred from correspondent banks? Well, some of the things you can do is exactly what you've been doing. Turn around, look at the source countries. Look at the correspondent bank that's sending that particular money. Look at the bank that you're sending it to. If there's anything that looks out of whack, let us know. Call any one of the 4 federal agencies. Call us in Washington and let us know about it, and we can take a look at it. But I guess what I'm standing here trying to tell you is that law enforcement does not have all the answers. We need you folks in the banking community to educate us. How can we all work together to turn around and stop this? And I think Republic National Bank is turned around to really help us do that. So I welcome whatever you're seeing out there in the community, whatever your ideas are on stopping narco dollars, on stopping narcotics trafficking. It's truly a partnership. We in federal law enforcement would like to think we're in a partnership with the banking community to turn around and stop this stuff. I know that you've already internalized a suspicious transaction reporting system from your international branches, and I applaud you for that. We would certainly like to help you and service you however we can in answering whatever questions you have and providing whatever intelligence is a poor choice of words, but whatever information we can on questions you have domestically and internationally regarding things that trouble you as a banking community. So it really is a partnership, and I applaud you for having us here and for being particularly frank with us. What are we seeing in terms of money laundering? They are always 3 steps ahead of us. They're more sophisticated than we are. They have the resources to do it. They certainly have the money to do it. And they have the ability to buy banks, buy correspondent banks, start their own banks. Money corrupts. There's no doubt about it. There's millions and millions and millions of dollars out there free for the taking. The money that they spend to put the money into the system is about, as Greg mentioned, about 60%. It takes 60% of those profits to put that money back into the banking system, and that's a significant chunk. And believe me, they'd like to reduce it. And if they can figure out electronic ways to do it, or if they can figure out any other method to do it, they're going to do that. Like I said, the days of hauling it in a suitcase and giving it to the local bank and depositing and sending it to Colombia are gone. You're finding layer upon layer of dummy corporations, of offshore corporations, of banks, of correspondent banks. You're finding them investing in different forms of flight capital, in different form of cost of goods sold. They're buying airplanes with it. It no longer goes in one end and comes out in Colombia. It's split up all along the way. And what we need to do is find out exactly how they're doing this and what we can do to turn around and stop it. They're using some of the methods they're using, and I don't want to go into them unless you really have some specific questions. And I'm going to throw the floor open to questions because I think that's probably the better way to handle this. But the primary use that we're seeing right now for them to get money out is through wire transfers. They'll move the money offshore. They'll put it into foreign banks. They'll move it under 3 or 4 different companies, and they'll get it to correspondent banks and move it through New York through the chip system. They'll get it down to correspondent banks in Colombia or Panama or Europe. Anywhere they can get that money to that's safely offshore, safely in their name, safely that they can get their hands on, they're going to turn around and do it. They can't do it in bulk form. You know, for every, as Greg said, for every 1 kilo of product, you're talking 3 kilos of money. And we're talking 5, 10s, 20s, and 50s. You're not talking sophisticated bills, letters of credit. They're turning around and putting those things into letters of credit now, though. They are forming that. They are trying to use letters of credit. They're utilizing the wire transfer systems. They're using loan repayments, any sophisticated thing that you can think of. They have tried to form themselves into a multinational cartel of business. And that's the front that they want to show you. They want to show you the front businesses. They want to show you that they're the individual, that they're the entrepreneurships. They want to invest in these businesses. The more that you know your customers, the more you can find out about his trends. If you see those deposits increase drastically over a short period of time, that should raise a flag to you. You might want to ask that customer, find out what's going on. Then again, if a large dollar volume account suddenly drops off your books, that should also raise a flag to you. Why did that in particular happen? A lot of times, the narcotics traffickers keep meticulous books. I mean meticulous books on every dollar that's ever moved. We have received and been able to intercept certain faxes and certain accounts for as much as questioning as much as $1,000. There's $1,000 missing. One guy will send his books to the accountant and they'll reconcile books. And people in these organizations have been killed for a lot less. So rather than take a chance of having somebody stealing their money, they just soon shut it down. So if you see a cash business, a high volume account of yours that automatically stops all of a sudden and is just gone, that should raise the question to you, why? That's something you might want to pass along to us and let us take a look at. As simple as it sounds, I guess the bottom line that I can leave you folks with is know your customer. If you know your customer, you know his trends, you know what's going on, you can try and keep the narco dollars out of the banking system. Are you going to get it all? Of course you're not. Are you going to stop the massive wire transfers of funds? No, you're not going to be able to do that either. We're not going to get every dollar of it. But if we can educate each other, if we can turn around and understand the complex systems of international banking from you folks, and if we can develop a game plan where we can identify this money and pull it out of the system, not only will it help the law enforcement community, the war on drugs, and it'll also assist the banking community. It's really going to help you folks a lot. I really don't have any more prepared remarks. I don't want to bore you with the law on CTRs and CMIRs, and we can go through that till we're blue in the face. And I sure as heck don't want to talk to you about taxes. That's the last thing in the world I want to talk about and the last thing you want to hear. And I'm not here to represent the IRS in form of taxes. I'm here to represent the Treasury Department, Internal Revenue Service, and what we can do in the war on drugs, and particularly to disrupt and dismantle the cartels, particularly in the money laundering end of it. So with that, I'd like to open it up. I'd like you folks to tell me some of your experiences, what you've seen, what we can do for you.
Oh, great. Okay.
I know that there's been a list of suspicious transactions that we've gotten that I know Great Britain has put out, and also that the Federal Reserve Board has unofficially issued. One of the descriptions of a suspicious transaction has been categorized as the back-to-back loan. I know bankers have dealt with back-to-back loans very successful over the years, and what I've been told is that a back-to-back loan makes a non-bankable transaction bankable. And I'd like to hear from you certain factors that would make a back-to-back loan either more suspicious or less suspicious. What should we be looking at when we look at our back-to-back loans to determine whether it is a legitimate transaction or it is being used by the money launderers and drug traffickers?
You'll have to use the other mic. I'll have to shut that one off. Okay. You turn that one on and we're flowing.
Well, I guess I'm not as well versed in back-to-back loans as I should be, so please bear with me. Obviously, you need to look at the aging and size and account of a loan. You need to look at how old the loan is and how it's being repaid, how it was set up in the first place. And you need to look at the frequency of the loans and the frequency of the payments. That's correct. You've basically taken a non-bankable transaction and made it a bankable transaction, and that's obviously a method to get it back into the banking system, but it's not one that we've really seen that frequently. I don't know if I answered your question, Ann, but...
Howard, maybe I could just a touch. Being the tag team experts we are here, one of the things I noticed in Switzerland with these buybacks, look at the length that the person has been doing business with your bank. If he's had a relationship over a 5-10 year period and then comes up with a loan buyback, most likely a legitimate reason. If the person walks into your bank on Monday and on Friday he's talking about this type of a transaction, I'd watch out for that. There is an indication that the Andean drug bosses are interested in investing in real estate in Portugal and Spain. I'd be very careful in reviewing loan buybacks into those specific areas.
Let me press you a little bit more on
One of the
this,
things that first impressed me
topic.
in dealing with your leadership
Should we
was
look
their
at the length of time
case
a
the money
deposit is on our books,
was
first of all,
good
before we make the
window
loan?
with- Yeah, if it's a typical drug transaction, they'll want to pay that off in a hurry. They'll want to bang it back out in maybe months to a year or so. Where a legitimate person would be interested in 3 to 5 year transaction. Anything that's quick and takes the middleman out of the picture is something you're looking forward. They don't, if they stick a middleman in there, they don't want that person in there too long because that person might get cold feet. Someone else might get jammed up in the organization that identifies this person. So they want to get in and out of the transaction as quickly as possible.
Okay, what about the location where the proceeds are going, loan proceeds?
Yeah.
There are some locations that are more suspicious than others.
No, the two I just told you about were Cali, Colombia. Tremendous problem with this. The Medellin cartel is a wounded cartel. They're not out of business yet. But by the pressure that the law enforcement community put on those guys and also the Colombian government over the last 2 years, they were somewhat weakened. What that enabled Cali to do was to gain in strength, to take over parts of the New York markets, Queens specifically from the Gotcha organization, and spread their tentacles into Western Europe. We are seeing increases of financial holdings in the Cali area. Hospitals, schools, things like that are springing up now that appear to be a little bit more than they have been in the last 4 or 5 years if you look at it as a trend. I'm not saying that all that money going into that area is drug related. I'm just saying it's a matter of fact that the Cali group is becoming very, very strong financially.
Are there any questions that you people have out there on back-to-back loans specifically before we move to any other area?
Could you give us an example of how a back-to-back loan could be used to hide either the origin or what's going on with the money?
Well, the best one that comes to my mind is the casino out on the West Coast. Establishment of a corporation in Liechtenstein, then show a influx of monies that appear to be from legitimate businesses in both the Channel Islands and also in Italy. And then when the money is deposited, you've got your equity built up in Liechtenstein, then take a loan out in Channel Islands and buy a card casino in Los Angeles. And that's one of the things I would be a little suspicious about is if you want the equities to be held in location A, but you want the loan to be made in location B, what's the purpose for that? Are you trying to avoid taxes? Are you trying to avoid the source of the actual loan? Does it come out of a country that the United States doesn't have a mutual legal assistance treaty with? Because the business advisors of the major drug cartels know where we can subpoena records. They know where we can get our hands on the true ownership of the money, and they know where we can't, where it's very difficult process to go through. Those countries, I think, I'd be a little bit suspicious of. In Switzerland, it's easy to get our hand on records. The Swiss have been very cooperative with us. Luxembourg has been great. Liechtenstein, also fantastic. Spain is just coming up on board. Most of these countries are playing catch-up right now. And it isn't because they're unwilling to cooperate with us. It's because their laws go back to the Napoleonic Code, where people's possessions are sacrosanct. You can't goof with the person's money or his properties, even if it's been gained through illegal means. A lot of these countries that want to cooperate on money laundering issues and were signatories to the Vienna Convention, which has 42 distinct proposals on how to shut this down, can't unless they change their constitutions. You will probably know the countries in which it is difficult for the United States to obtain documentation on bank accounts. Those would be a place I think I'd be a little bit wary.
The back-to-back loans that we see normally are obtained for the purpose of investing in the country where our client comes from for what would seem to us to be perfectly legitimate purposes. He may be buying some property in the country. He may be lending the money to his own local company using assets that were flight capital that he took out ages ago. Now, how can you identify what is a non-legitimate back-to-back loan?
I think you answered that in that the monies were deposited ages ago, or the account relationship goes back for more than just months or even a year. It's going to be very difficult. I'll be very honest with you to be able to ferret these out. But I would look. I'd look at the length the person was a client of your bank as being probably the first indicator, and second of all, look at the interest rates. Do they fall in line with what the normal rates would be? How about the payback schedule? Does it appear to be within the normal ranges? If it isn't, these are indications that it might not be correct. Now, the only thing you could do in that, if you do have doubts, is you've got people in New York. That's their job.
Okay, let me give you a practical example. Say that we have been, that we know a certain manufacturer in Uruguay. We have not had an account from him at all, but we would like to. And he comes to us and he says, I'd be willing to transfer $1 million to you from Citibank, but I may need to borrow back $500,000 in a 2 or 3 year back-to-back loan because I want to use it in my business here and I don't want to use my own funds. Now, what am I supposed to do? This is someone, he has not been a client of ours, he is well respected in the community, he comes from Uruguay, and I'd also incidentally like to hear what comments you might have about Uruguay. I mean, what do you do? Do you turn the business down because you haven't had the deposit for 5 years?
No, I think you use your common sense as a banking professional. In fact, we should probably change positions. You should be up here telling me what to look for, and I should be down there asking you the questions. And that's all we're asking you. We realize the constraints that you people have, and we don't want to have a knee-jerk reaction that we tell you, hey, you got to shut down any new business. That's not fair to your bank. We are very encouraged by the interest that Mr. Weiner has taken into working with us, so we can get a exchange of information to you. We can let you know what areas we think are going to be problems for the bank and areas we'd like you to help us out with. On the other hand, if that little voice in the back of your head says, geez, why would this person be willing to cease a relationship with a bank that he's had for 5 or 6 years? Is there a reason why he would want to move the money into Montevideo? If it makes sense, if the economic conditions in Montevideo make sense, accept the business. If it doesn't make sense, I might have second thoughts about it.
Do you have reasons, Ulysses, why they want to change the relationship?
Let's say, I mean, simply that we are trying to build our business there, and that we may be visiting the client and asking him to open an account relationship with us. Again, based on the fact that he's had a good reputation in the local market, that he is well known to several other of our clients, and that we'd like to do business with him. And my only concern is that in trying to prevent a lot of bad things that I also want to prevent, that we throw away the baby with the bathwater, as it were.
Well, it sounds like you've already done really your homework back behind it. You've established that he is an established businessman in the community. You've established his good record. Again, it goes back to know your customer. You can only do so much. If he's a legitimate businessman, is looking for what appears to be a long-term relationship, is setting up legitimate sources for those funds, he can show you where they're going into. He can explain the transactions and show that it's not just a one-time deal, quick to turn around and move money. Again, these are all indicators, and this is about all that you can do at this point. I mean, you can't get in his head. You can't go back behind it. All you can do is use your good sense as bankers in the banking community. If you find out that this guy's got a police record, if you find out that he's had a couple accounts seized at another bank, that there's a report out that he's tied to the cartels, anything that would raise a question to you, then you need to make that decision at your level as far as what that is. If you feel uncomfortable with it, then you have to make a business decision. Is this good for the bank, and is this business that I want, or isn't it? And you make the decision at that level. If you decide to go ahead with it and you still have questions, raise it to your head office, raise it to your banking officials. Maybe there's something we can do to give you a hand. Maybe there's something we can look and say, hey, we don't have anything. That's about all you can do. They're really, I mean, you can't check the source of every single dollar that comes through. We can't run a drug dog against absolutely every dollar that gets into the system. All you've got to do is use the common sense, which sounds like you've already done that. If he's new in the area, if he doesn't have a permanent residence, if he's got dual citizenship and spends 99% of his time elsewhere, these are concerns, these are issues, these are things you need to take a look at. But it sounds like you're already on top of them.
Ulysses, a key question that occurred to me is how long has he had the time deposit or the account at Citibank? And that's one of the things you'd want to know. You had a question.
I have one comment and one question. I believe that the rules that you are applying in the United States to get the money laundering, you cannot apply in South America. South America, everything moved there by corruption. I believe that over there you need more political pressure than back-to-back. Or, you know, I know that our bank doesn't like the unsecured business. And if you are going to eliminate the back-to-back and we're eliminating the deposit, I believe that you put us out of the business, not the cartel. And this is not the idea. The second question, what you are doing with the money that you are getting from the dirty money?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the second part.
The dirty money that you are catching, what you are doing with it? No, let me give you an idea before you answer.
You didn't put me on the spot too much with either one of those
listen,
questions, but...
You just mentioned that you are a good partner of
Yes.
us. Why you are not participating in the cost of this conference as a partner?
You raised several issues. First of all, the political end of it. There's no question that politics are involved in this, and I would like to speak to it, but those are only my personal opinions. As the law enforcement community, we're totally involved, and we are getting assistance politically in the understanding of drug money and obviously the war on drugs. There needs to be more. There's no question about it. Whether it's more asset-wise, political-wise, a combination of both. And I think that all of the countries and all of the governments need to work a little bit more and a little bit better with it. What are we doing with the money that we seize? Most of it goes back into the Treasury. A lot of it goes back into the agencies to turn around and fight the war on drugs. There are international sharing agreements that we do have. and we in the law enforcement community encourage, and we've been really pushing to turn around and find the political mechanisms to turn around and share money with our counterparts in the different countries. A lot of times the red tape won't allow us to do this or won't allow us to do as much as we want. We are acutely aware of the problem that when we seize multi-millions of dollars with the assistance of law enforcement community from a foreign country or foreign host, we would definitely like to share that with them and get that back to them, and we're trying to do that. We've had limited successes with it. I anticipate there'll be a whole lot more. I don't know if I've answered your questions, but
you know, we in the law enforcement community have to be realistic about this. To assume that we can stop drug trafficking with law enforcement measures would be very naive. We have active programs now in preventative education arenas that we never thought we'd be into 20 years ago. Our job used to be put the cuffs on him, take his money and his dope away, and go on to the next arrest. Whatever we have been doing obviously hasn't worked. And I think the fact that Howard and I are here today with you is an indication that what we've been doing hasn't been working. We've had our successes, we've taken our losses, and overall the problem's gotten worse. We realize that a strong Latin American economies are probably going to be very helpful in stopping the flow of drugs to our country. We welcome that, and that's why we want to be very careful in when we talk about legislating banking industries, that we do not inhibit the flow of capital, that we do not put constraints on you that hurt the economies, because a healthy economy is something that we would want to have. When you have people that are earning $50 a month or even less in certain areas, and they can grow coca paste or transport it, convert it, and support and feed their families, it's pretty tough to stop a person who has a hungry family to feed at nighttime. And we recognize that fact. As far as where the money goes, in the gotcha funds, I believe we've received about $9 million of that back in the States. And 4 has been forfeited. The other 5 will be forfeited hopefully in the next 2 weeks. We would like to see as much of that money get back to Colombia as possible. One of the fellows who was helping us seize financial records, very, very key element in our effort down there, Captain Royhouse, was killed about 6 months ago by the traffickers. We would like to set up some kind of a trust fund for the widows and the orphans of the Colombian police officers who've died in this effort. And there are over 1,000 of them who have been killed by both cartels. And I'd just like to mention that to you, that when you talk about countries and their resolve and the corruption factor and stuff like that, you can't throw a blanket over the whole country. You can't make a stereotype, because each of those countries that has been accused of corruption has some very, very brave people who have paid with their lives for this, to help us in this effort. And we want to make sure we don't forget about those people. I was going to, Ann had asked if I could maybe go through one case involving your bank and how it was used to launder money.
Greg, before you do, there's a couple of
other questions
okay. Out here that I'd like to get to. One, I just want to pick up a comment that you just made about wanting to have a healthy economy. We all know that our economy receives a boost from the flight capital, especially from South American countries. One of the concerns that we have is the sharing of tax information with the South American governments. My first question is, does there have to be an active criminal investigation going on in South America before we share any tax information? Or is it simply we get a request, let's say, from Argentina, we'd like any and all information you have in the United States on ABC company? And then do we respond to that without knowing what's behind it?
Well, actually, it's a combination of both. We have to work within the MLATs, Mutual Legal Assistance Treaties, and a lot of the criminal treaties before we can turn around and share tax information. So we get the official requests that come through that particular way, and it does not have to be an open criminal investigation as long as it meets all of the requirements of the treaties, which all of them are different. There are circumstances, too, where there is not a mutual legal assistance treaty, where the country comes to us asking us for help. They're working a criminal case. It expands into the United States, and they'd like our assistance in working it. And we do accommodate those requests, too, on an international level and assisting with domestically. So it really depends on the way the request comes up, the scope of the request, and what our treaties are. Sometimes we can just turn around and provide them with whatever information they need. Sometimes we work with them as a joint partner in law enforcement on a particular investigation. So I guess the answer to your question is yes, it can be both ways depending on the current status of the treaties. And just to take that one step further, they are trying now through the economic summits to create more and more mutual legal assistance treaties to allow us to work closer together in a law enforcement package with our foreign counterparts, particularly those involved in the economic summits and in the Andean strategy. And it appears that we are opening a lot of inroads and getting a lot of successes in the ability to share particular information in these money laundering cases.
I think there may be some questions as follow-up on that. I know Eric DeLisi from Geneva has a question or two here.
From one of the statistics which you showed, I noticed that over a 3-year period, you have confiscated about $3 billion worth of assets, which compared to the size, to the estimated size of the drug profits is really peanuts. It seems to me to indicate also the sophistication of the professionals in the drug trade in recycling the money through legitimate channels. What we're trying to do is to contribute to increase a little bit that success rate. Of course, our means are much more limited than yours are. I mean, we are reduced to guessing. If we're right, we've helped you. If we're wrong, we've lost a legitimate customer. What I was wondering is, in the course of these investigations which you've had, I don't know how many incidents have produced the $3 billion in seizures, but have you come up with some sort of a profile, statistical profile of people who are susceptible, legitimate people who are susceptible to turning bad, or people who have been bad all the time and who got caught?
I think the people that are most susceptible right now are those involved in cambios, gyros, money exchange businesses. Businesses that will accept cash and in return give some kind of a negotiable instrument. In many cases, they're not regulated. They don't have the rules you people play by. They will have a relationship maybe with your bank. I know Republic is discouraged and almost shut it down throughout the world because your management realized the risk involved in dealing with cambios. Those people are probably the ones that will be most at risk. I think that people who set up specialize in establishing businesses and front companies.
Greg, I have to stop you a minute for a change of tape.